Hello friends, I am Nisha Sharma, Associate Professor, Department of English, Government College, Khetri. The topic under discussion today is Hopkins' poem, The Sea and the Skylark. We'll evaluate the poem critically. The poem, The Sea and the Skylark, was penned by Gerard Manley Hopkins. Hopkins is a Victorian poet only by birth. Born in the mid 19th century, his childhood was shaped by events of the Victorian society rather than the pre-Victorians as has been the case with Tennyson, Browning and Arnold. Hopkins moreover wrote against the current. He also did not publish during his lifetime. His poems were published in 1918, almost 30 years after his death. That is the reason behind the fact that he is included in the anthologies of both the Victorian and the modern. It is interpreted by most poets that his poetry is a synthesis of old and modern. The sonnet, The Sea and the Skylark, was written while Hopkins was in a 3-year course of study at the Jesuit Theologiate St. Bruno's in North Wales. He wrote many of his best known poems during this period. One autograph of this poem is dated Ryle, May 1877 and is entitled Walking by the Sea. Suffering from fatigue, Hopkins is granted permission to spend some time at the seaside resort town of Ryle, 8 miles north of St. Bruno's. Hopkins writes later to his friend Robert Bridges on 26 November 1882 that this poem was written during his Welsh days when he was fascinated with Singhanet. Singhanet is a sound arrangement within one line using stress, alliteration, and rhyme. It is a lesser known poem of Hopkins, and it was good that it did not publish during his life because its theme wouldn't have appealed the people at that time. The problem presented in the poem has more relevance in the modern time. Two sounds are entrenched in his thinking as he walks along the beach. On his right, the ebb and flow of the waves on the shore, and on his left, the unfurling song of the skylark. In the sestet, the last 6 lines of the sonnet, Hopkins reflects on what a shame it is that we have lost the ability to pay attention to and appreciate these sounds of creation. The sea and skylark, spatial and sensory locations are important at the start of the octave. The speaker is standing on or beside the beach at Ryle, the seaside town in North Wales, where the sonnet's first draft was written. With a sense of double occasion, he hears the sea on his right and the lark song rising from the meadowland on his left. The registering of these complex sounds requires 2 years. The first line of the poem clearly sets the context and motivation of the work, as the narrator introduces the idea that we are not only dealing with the effects of two different sounds, but also that they are significantly too old to end, giving an immediate sense both of their timelessness and the reverence they are due. He then moves simply to distinguish between them, as the first stanza is concerned with the sound to his right, namely the sea, and the second deals with that to his left, a skylark. We are struck both by the immediate appeal they produce through the emphatic use of compound language typical of Hopkins' style, in crisps of curl of wild winch word, and by the significant sense of permanence he equates with them frequenting there while moon shall wear and bend, alluding back to the feeling that they are simply too old to end. And this contrasts with the image of humanity presented in the final two stanzas. How these two shame this shallow and frail town. How ring right out our sordid turbid time, being pure. In contrast with the permanent and powerful sound of the bird and the sea, the town nearby for Hopkins is shallow and frail, illustrating the transitory and insignificant nature of civilization. Indeed, the sounds of nature literally shame mankind because of their purity, and this completely overpowers the sordid town nearby. It is true that sordid and turbid are perhaps over emphatic in their expression of negativity concerning civilization, but they arguably indicate Hopkins' desire to illustrate not only how shameful mankind is in relation to nature, but also how far it has fallen from its rightful position within the natural world. We, life's pride and care for crown, where God created mankind as literally the crowning glory of his world, the rulers over both animal and plant, the poet now appreciates that this situation and power is no longer afforded to a humanity that has lost that cheer and charm of earth's past prime, that has been reduced to a level far below both the sea and the skylark, to whom the poet turns for relief. This time, the poet is placed apart from the rest of humanity, and there is significantly no sense that a restoration to God might bring him closer to his kind once more. Instead, the final stanza illustrates the complete regression of mankind back to inanimate matter or slime, inverting the natural process of evolution and echoing the Christian belief in the creation of man. Our make and making break are breaking down to man's last dust, drain fast towards man's first slime. Through this reference to the creation story, it is arguable that in the context of the failings of society and alienations from God, Hopkins alludes to the first fall of mankind in the Garden of Eden. Of course, the sins of Adam and Eve were accounted for by the birth and death of Christ, but significantly, no comfort such as this is given at the end of the poem. Unlike the final line of God's grandeur, there is no hope for the moral enhancement of mankind through a potential realization of the interest of God in nature. Instead, humanity, in contrast with the sea and skylark who remain too old to end, has become frail due to its corruption and oblivion to God, meaning that it cannot withstand the time scale of nature. In a moment of bleak reality, Hopkins loses his faith in humanity's restoration to God. The sea itself makes a divided noise as a flood or a fall, with the heavy, pebbly harshness of right, tide, rams, suggesting the incoming tide, and a gentler consonantal strain depicting the low lull as the tide retreats. That the process is continuous and endless is beautifully conveyed in the present participle frequenting. The sea and the moon are almost personified, but Hopkins challenges poetic convention as he flirts with it. In the second quatrain, the lark's score is his song, visualized as a skein which uncoils in a process that combines the rash phrase and the repetitive in an endless intricate pattern, rewinded and new schemed. The movement of coiling and curling from a wild winged world is both free and controlled. And line 8 tells us Note a note of this music is excessive or wasted. Hopkins looks downwards in the system, condemning human intrusion with a mix of light and heavy adjectives: shallow, frail, sordid, turbid, and evoking a miniature industrial revolution in the hard, angry, reductive rhymes of our make and making, break are breaking. Dust and slime represent spiritual degeneration. No doubt, they were also the visible byproducts of the construction work that changed Ryle from centuries old fishing village to Victorian watering place. Contrasted with man's last dust, man's first slime might be an image of regeneration rather than despair. Thus, the polarity of the title is between water and air, the sea and the skylark, representative of nature. The body of the poem, more specifically in the last six lines, introduces a third point of reference: Earth inhabited by man. The octave is purely descriptive, giving detailed imagery of sea and skylark as Hopkins forms as precise an landscape of them as he can. It is left to the sestet to make a comment, this time in the form of an exclamation rather than by posing a question. The sestet sees the two things which, according to the Bible, were created by God as shaming the man made town which lies behind him. Now comes the heading Symbolism. The town is a symbol of man's fall from a much better, more innocent prime. There is heavy irony here as Hopkins picks up the theme of the ugliness of modern life and compares it to the uniqueness and beauty of nature. There is irony in the poem. The irony springs from a further irony, though Darwinism and Christianity are often seen as opposed, both agree that humankind is the highest form of development in the world. However, to Hopkins, humanity's so-called progress is towards man's first line. In its superficiality, it is reversing down any so-called chain of evolution. The poet has also made use of archaic language. Where and when is an example of archaic use. Wend is an archaic expression for went, but it is more likely to have been borrowed from Old English, wenden meaning to travel, to go, to change. There is use of oxymoron also. Oxymoron is a figure of speech in which apparently contradictory terms appear in conjunction. In the phrase, noises too old to end, use of oxymoron can be seen. The poet refers to the sound of waves and skylark which have been there for ages and are eternal. It employs contradictory processes. Something which is old should be easy to end, be on the verge of fading out. There it has acquired a permanent status. There is beautiful use of alliteration in the poem. The poet has repeated not only sounds but words too. He says flood or fall, low lull off, where and when, wild winch whirl, spill span, shame shallow, crisp curl, ring right, cheer charm, ear and ear, make making, break breaking. Now we come to the form or structure of the poem. Just as it has been already stated, the poem is a sonnet. It is a regular Petrarchan sonnet, and a sonnet has 14 lines. And these lines rhyme ABBA, ABBA, CDC, DCD with a clearly marked division between octave and sestet. with unusually each section being again divided into half into two quatrains or two tercets as the case may be. In the octave, Hopkins compares two ancient sounds, that of the sea and that of a songbird, the skylark, one of whose favorite haunts is sand dunes. The first quatrain deals with the sea. Hopkins is walking along the shore near the North Wales town of Ryle, some 6 or 7 miles from the college. Ryle was then an up and coming tourist resort on account of its wide sandy beach. While westwards he would have the sea on his right, Hopkins uses the octave for the description of the earth and the sexter to point out the negative aspects caused by human civilization. While the first part has a very positive character expressing joy and agility, the second part appears dark and destructive. This effect is created by contrasting words, as for example, fresh and dust. In my sensations, this opposition remains rather unresolved. The only solution offered for the discrepancies between nature and man is the death of the latter ones, which doesn't appear that satisfactory. In the last line, it is stated that even the human being is part of life's endless circuit, which consists of birth and death. But the author doesn't see any positive effect resulting from our existence. In line 12, we find a hint that there isn't any improvement expected, but rather a further decline with the ongoing development of man. Have we ever contributed to the positive features of earth and nature? Then this has by far been lost. Whatever we may have created is not just not going to last, but we also even destroy actively. Now, there is a note of modernism in the poem. Hopkins belongs to modernism in more than one way. The poem belongs to modernism on the basis of its subject and syntax. The individualism of Hopkins' verse is an objective individualism, for it is very different from the subjective emotionalism of the Romantics. It anticipates the Eliottian theory of impersonality. There is a questioning of the relationship of God to men and men to nature. This questioning is underlined by doubt and tension, which in turn is expressed in compressed syntax and the sprung rhythm he evolved to suit his thoughts. Sprung rhythm did not adhere to any conventional metrical feat. Instead, it allowed the words to create their own rhythm. Very often, he coined new words, used archaic or colloquial expression to meet this requirement. This rhythm permitted him greater flexibility. While Finch were. In this phrase, the poet is continuing the metaphor implied by new skinned. Winch is again Old English used to indicate a hoisting machine in which a drum or a barrel is turned by a crank, a rotatory movement. Whirl also indicates rotation, and wild means free, spontaneous, the rising notes of the bird's song. Now, pelt, an unusual use. Pelt ordinarily is used for pelting stones. The word is used for the flow of music which overwhelms the listener until there is none to waste. Thus, in this poem, Hopkins compares the sound of the sea and the skylark to that of a human civilization. The sounds of the bird and ocean are natural and pure. He describes them beautifully as crisps of curl of wild winch whirl and a low lull or all roar. On the other hand, he describes the sounds of the town as sordid and turbid. I think what he is getting at is that the sounds of nature, of the sea and the skylark, are simple and pure, while the sounds of people in the town are complicated and dirty. While we see ourselves as life's pride and cared for crown, we are not nearly as beautiful as the sea and skylark. While they have retained all the beauty of nature, we are moving away from it. We have lost that cheer and charm of Earth's past prime and are instead moving towards man's last dust and slime. By considering ourselves above earth and nature and becoming complicated instead of hanging on to simplicity, we have lost the beauty that can be found in the sea and the skyline. Thank you.